Hello everyone and welcome to Quality Star Wars Games. Today we are making another tier list, this time from Empire's unit roster. This is from the original vanilla game, so the Forces of Corruption expansion is not included, and the perspective of this tier list is from campaign perspective and from Galactic Conquest perspective. So, in addition to the unit's fighting capabilities, also the requirements and prices are taken into account. But without further ado, let's begin with ground units. First we have 2M Repulsor tank, kind of a higher tier ground unit for Empire. And well, if I think this, it's kind of compared to AT-AT and AT-ST in my books. And when you get AT-ATs, these guys do become completely obsolete, in my opinion. If you have only AT-STs, then these tanks might be viable. But overall, I don't think that I use them that much. Of course, they can take on those Rebellion's T4Bs rather nicely, especially with that increased firepower. So they are not useless, but I think I will only give them a place in, let's put them into weak B tier, at least for now. Perhaps, well, I'm thinking kind of strong C, weak B, but let's leave them to weak B. Then we have AT-AA Walker, kind of a niche unit designed for anti-air. And I think the unit would be rather good if there were no building pads. And of course, in those instances, only to protect AT-ATs mainly. But once, or rather because they have building pads, and those can be built rather easily, and AT-AT can deploy stormtroopers, I think these units are kind of obsolete. And furthermore, their requirements are quite high for them. So I have to admit that I almost never build any of these, so I will give them D tier. Of course, the snow speeders are or assault speeders are the main counter for AT-ATs, but still, I think you can counter those speeders well enough with those build pads, which you can acquire even when you are doing the ground invasion of enemy planet. And perhaps there is some inclination already, AT-AT. I think, well, the downside is that it comes really late, and it can be vulnerable to assault speeders and their tow cables, like in Empire Strikes Back. But overall, I think they are by far the best combat unit in the battlefield. Of course, there might be an issue if the enemy gets really close, then the AT-AT cannot target them. But overall, if you have several of these, that problem is kind of mitigated. And what's most impressive about them, they have unlimited supply of stormtroopers. You can have only 2 squads deployed at a time from the belly of the beast, but unlimited supply of 2 stormtroopers at a time means practically if you have 10 AT-ATs on the field, you will have simultaneously 20 stormtrooper units, and that's quite a lot. So in my opinion, despite the AT-AT being late game unit, it deserves a place in S tier. Then we have AT-ST, that's kind of, in at least my campaigns, the workhorse. It seems I'm becoming too imperial, forced labor and so on and so forth. But yeah, the old workhorse of imperial ground troops, easily available, and well, they can take out infantry rather nicely by walking over them, and they can even do some serious damage to enemy vehicles. They are easily available, I think I already mentioned that, but they are also cheap. So you can have endless waves of these practically, and they train fast if you have multiple light factories. So I think I will give them weak A, or perhaps I will give them just A tier, because of the wide usability of the AT-STs, ease and availability and so on. Then we have these Imperial Artillery Vehicles, SPMAT walkers. That's the name already is a monster. But yeah, I don't really know. Artillery pieces are quite nice, especially the Rebel one, but then the Rebel ones have those kind of spotter drones in the same unit, and these are lacking them. So they need some kind of scouting to be effective, and if they don't have it, then at least in 1 versus 1, those MPTL2As will just wreck these with those spotter units. So I don't know. I should use them more than I use, but I think let's put them to strong B tier, because, well, they can still be utilized when you get 80s, but I think the usability decreases at least somewhat. So I don't know. Kind of they are kind of fall between ATST and AT-AT, since quite often when you are taking up, then you will take up straight to the tier 4 or 5, enough to get AT-ATs, tier 4 I guess, or 3, 4, and well, then I don't think these guys will see that much use after that. Then we have TIE Maulers, kind of interesting unit. It's fast and fragile. It has that self-destruct ability. I have to say I don't use that too much. The speed can be nice against infantry, of course. The AI can micro its troopers well enough to avoid it, and it's fragile and gets usually destroyed before it can actually explode in that self-destruct mode. So I guess the unit is just meant to be destroyed even by itself or by the enemies, and because of that I will give it only C tier. Then we have speeder bikes or scout troopers, perhaps the fastest ground unit in the game. Well, perhaps those assault speeders are a bit faster. They can drop those thermal detonators or whatever they are to explode or blow up enemy infantry. But, I mean, they are really glass cannonies, and their main weapon doesn't do much damage. Of course, they are kind of meant to be spotters, for instance, for these SPMAT walkers. But overall, I don't use them much. Of course, they come out as a garrison from barracks, so that's nice, but overall, I don't think they are that useful. I mean, I almost never train them, at the very least. If I want to train infantry, I will train stormtroopers, and if I want to train some advanced units, I will train ATSTs. So I think D tier from me for these guys. And then we have stormtroopers. They are not that good for much, but usually they come in numbers, especially from the bellies of AT-ATs, and they are garrison units and they can use build pads rather nicely. They are cheap, easy to access, so despite them being rather bad, I think they are utilized, or at least I utilize them quite a bit, so they will get tier B from me for being such a useful cannon fodder in the battles. And actually they lose one-on-one battle against rebel soldiers, so yeah, B tier, and the weaker end of B tier. Then let's move to space units, and first we have Acclamator class cruiser, and well, that's easily accessible, multiple weapon systems, and even proton torpedo launcher, which is rather nice because those torpedoes bypass shields. Of course, Acclamator's torpedoes don't do that much, but it also carries 1 unit of TIE fighters and 1 unit of TIE bombers, and that's really nice because all Imperial ships serve as carriers, or at least almost all serve as carriers as well. So then again, the unit is rather weak, it gets destroyed rather easily, and especially those hard points are easily wiped out, so the unit loses its utility, especially against higher tier targets, really fast. So I think it's kind of the early game workforce until you get some better units. Actually, I think that, at least in my playing, this unit gets replaced rather easily, and because of that, I need to give it B tier. It's not kind of too bad or not that bad to give C tier. So yeah, let's give it B because it's actually quite decent for its price and requirements. Then we have Broadside Cruiser, kind of a special unit used to bombard targets from a long range, and paired with TIE Scouts, this can be really useful, especially against space stations, capital ships, if these capital ships are not moving fast enough out of the area. I think these guys do deserve a place either in strong A or in weak S tier. I think I will actually put them into S tier. They are really, really useful. Actually in both offensive and defensive battles. And by the way, I have to say about Acclamator, it also provides bomber support for ground battles as well. So that's quite impressive from tier 1 level unit. Then we have Death Star, tier 5, really expensive, slow to build. Then again, it's kind of invulnerable against everything except Luke Skywalker. And of course, when you bring Death Star, it's most likely that the enemy will be focusing Luke to face this. So, and if I remember correctly, you kind of lose the whole campaign if Death Star gets destroyed. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And that makes me wonder where to put it. Because in the end game, if there are strongly fortified rebel enclaves, the Death Star can be really nice. So basically, when it destroys the planet, it wipes out the ion cannon. If you pull back, then the rebels... Actually, will the space station survive? I'm not sure. But even so, taking out the ion cannon is really nice. So that makes the space battles somewhat easier. But of course, if it gets wiped out, you lose. So, I don't know. I think despite its Achilles heel and the need that you protect it really well, especially from fighters, I think I will give it A tier. So it can be rather important at wiping out the last remaining rebels. Then we have Imperial Star Destroyer, tier 4 unit, space unit, and actually, I mean, lore-wise, Star Destroyer should be the kind of armored fortress bristling with weapons and blowing out everything that gets into its path, pretty much, except fighters. But in this game, it actually loses one-on-one against Mon Calamari Cruiser, which is kind of, in my opinion, weird. And actually, its hard points are not that strong, in my opinion. And also, its shields quite often leave something to hope for. So I think I often think of it more as a carrier, because it does carry quite a few TIE fighters and TIE bombers, which can be deployed so that's 2 fighters at one time and 1 TIE bomber squadron at one time. So that is kind of limiting factor there, but if you use the fighters and bombers first, then the ship can get quite a bit of value. The problem is the population cost, which is 4, which practically means that you can have only 5 of these in the battlefield at one time, and then you cannot have anything else. So I'm kind of disappointed in this unit. It's by all means not bad, but in my opinion, it's not that good either. So I think I will give it strong B or weak A. Because, well, perhaps because of its kind of carrier nature, I will give it weak A tier. But still, a disappointing unit, in my opinion. Then we have Interdictor Cruiser. Well, it's nice that you can prevent rebels from entering hyperspace. That's really cool. So if you are winning the battle, you can wipe the last remaining rebels out. That's nice. Then again, it costs 3 population support, which is kind of out from the fighting craft. So usually you don't want to bring this ship in at the beginning of the battle, but only at the end of it. Of course, it has that missile jamming capability, so if enemy has many those Marauder cruisers, and they are beginning to launch their missiles at you, then that missile jamming can be rather useful, but still, I'm not a big fan of this ship. It gets taken out rather quickly, and rather a niche unit. I don't say it's useless, but at least I don't use it too much, and I think I will give it only C tier because of that. Then we have Tartan Patrol Cruiser, and a kind of Imperial workhorse against fighters. And since Imperial capital ships are quite vulnerable to fighters, and those TIEs really don't do that much against enemy fighters, well, perhaps against enemy bombers they do, but usually enemy has fighters in addition to bombers, so I think this unit is needed throughout the game as a support unit for the heavier hitters. You don't need many of these in your fleet, but they can be useful at hunting down enemy Marauder cruisers and especially providing anti-fighter support. So they don't shine against any other targets except fighters, and even against fighters I think Corellian corvettes are actually better, but still, as the unit is the workhorse of Imperial Navy throughout the campaign, I think these guys deserve a place in solid A tier. I think I will put them right here on the top. Then we have TIE bombers, and well, both TIE units, bomber and fighter, are kind of free units you get from most of Imperial capital ships. And of course, when you get free units, you can be sure that they are not the highest tier units. And I think that applies to TIE bomber as well. Then again, as most of the rebel ships do have those shield boost special ability, bombers can be really useful at taking down the enemy ships. So I think actually Imperial Star Destroyer, while it loses one-on-one against Mon Calamari Cruiser, with TIE Bomber Squadron, the ISD can actually win. So these are really useful, and also they are really useful at taking down the enemy Starbase Shield Generator and Hangar Bay and whatnot. So they are kind of vulnerable, but the Empire needs them. Interestingly, their capital ships in space battle are not juggernauts that can just push through anything, but they need to utilize these TIEs and TIE bombers especially. So I think the bombers actually deserve a place in A tier. I don't know, perhaps somewhere around here. Still disappointed on the Star Destroyer, so it gets left behind TIE bombers. Yeah, I think A tier, even though this might be a bit controversial because these guys do get taken out rather easily if enemy starfighters or anti-fighter units are close by, but still. Then we have TIE fighters. I mean, their main utility is to hunt down enemy bombers, and then they can slow down enemy fighters. With sufficient numbers, they can actually beat them, but still kind of, I don't know, really weak unit. Then again, they are mostly free units coming from Victory Star Destroyer, Victory Cruiser in the game terms, from Acclamator, from ISD. So, yeah, I don't know. Because they are free, that's clearly a bonus, but they are still quite bad. So that's obviously a minus. I think I will give them a place in C tier. And above Stormtroopers, because I like space battles more than ground battles. A really solid ground, don't you agree? Then we have TIE Scout. I clearly use these units too little because they kind of play well in tandem with broadside cruisers. They do require Tech 3 to build, and they are pretty much the only space unit at Tech 3 the Empire gets, so yeah, in fight they are completely useless, but that sense-hopping ability is quite nice in space battles, especially paired with broadside cruisers. Then again, if you don't need that ping ability, then these guys are useless. They are just using the supply. So I guess I will give them C tier. Yeah. Because they have that one ability, and that's pretty much it. Then we have Victory Cruiser or Victory Star Destroyer, which is, in my opinion, really is not Victory Cruiser. Tier 2 unit, so you get it early. Really few hard points. So that's clearly a minus. But then again, those hard points are actually harder than the hard points of ISD, which is kind of surprising for me at the very least. The power to weapons ability is rather nice. Actually, Acclamators and Tartans have that as well. It can be rather useful when their shields are down. But with Victory, it actually can have decent enough firepower with that ability to actually harm the enemies quite badly. It carries several squadrons of TIE fighters and, if I remember correctly, a couple of squadrons of TIE bombers, and those can be utilized so that there are 2 TIE fighters and 1 TIE bomber squadron at play at one time. The main benefit of this unit is that its supply is only 3 points. So basically you can have 6 of these units in the battlefield at one time, and even some support craft like Tartan Patrol Cruiser as well, or 1 broadside cruiser. So that's a rather nice combination. So, for instance, you can have 6 free TIE bomber squadrons and 12 free TIE fighter squadrons in the field at one go, if you are using mostly Victory Destroyers. So, based on this, I think they are actually the Imperial spaceship I use the most, and they are actually one of the best spaceships Empire has. And because of that, I will give them a place in S tier. Take that, UISD, which are a disappointment still. So, this is my view of the Imperial units in Empire at War campaign and Galactic Conquest setting. Do you agree or disagree? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Have a great rest of the day. Quality Star Wars Games out.